All right, the next section, solving radical and rational. What's the difference? What are they? What is a rational equation? What kind? What does it look like? See, there is in the math, there's no regular equation. We have 1,000 different types. What do you think rational means? What are the first 5 letters of the word rational? What is a ratio?
It's that number, blah, blah.
It's fraction. When we say rational, we only mean fraction. What's a radical? When we say radical, what are we talking about? Yeah. Typically now we call those nth roots. Nth root. Whatever number's inside here, that tells you what nth root is. So if there's nothing there, it's a square root. If there's a 3 in there, it's a cube root. And so on and so forth. So let's first look at rational equations. For example, what if we had x minus 8 over 3 equals x minus 3 over 2? Here are your steps. Set equal to 0. Because these are polynomials. So the first thing we have to do is move one of these numbers from one side to the other. So we subtract x minus 3 over 2 from both sides. You must have common denominators. I'm showing to you now the way the rules say it, and then we're going to redo this another way and see if we get the same answer. So what's the common denominator? So what do we have to multiply to the first one to get 6? So it's top and bottom by 2. Why do we multiply top and bottom by 2? Yes, but why? That is very true. Whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. Well, what exactly is 2 over 2? 1. So I'm multiplying by 1. When you multiply by 1, is it changing it? No. All it does, it changes the way it looks. And the other one, we have to multiply that one by a 3, or 3 over 3. So we just distribute now. Now here we have, since we have on the bottom, they both equal 6, I can now combine both equations. Since you have a common denominator, I represent it once. So I have 2 times x minus 8 minus 3x minus 3 equals 0. What's my next step? Get rid of the distribute, get rid of the parentheses. So we have 2x minus 8 minus 3x minus 3. So we have 2x minus 16 Remember, this negative belongs to this 3. So I'm multiplying -3 times x. -3 times negative times negative is a positive. 3 times 3 is 9. Whatever's in front of the parenthesis, that if it's a negative, it stays with that number. Combine like terms. 2x minus 3x is -1x. -16 plus 9, 16 is bigger. 16 minus 9 is 7. So are we anywhere close? So what's our answer? Anybody notice what I did wrong?
Bottom middle.
Right here. I started off. We have to get a common denominator, but this is not how you do it. Why not? Because everything from here on out is wrong. Because when I did this, this is on one side of the equation. So this whole side has to be treated as one number. So let's go back to where we were. Let's go back to here. Yes.
I was looking, I'm not getting where we went wrong, but I'm sorry.
So you can't just multiply one side by 2, one side by 3.
Right, because they're on one side of the equation. See, because they're both on one side of the equation, they have to be treated equally.
Okay.
If I was going to do anything, I'd have to multiply by the same number. I can't do 2 over 2 and 3 over 3. That's the reason. That's the most common mistake students do.
Okay.
So our equation we had was x minus 8 over 3 equals negative, let's say x minus 3 over 2. Here's the rule of thumb that you should work with whenever you deal with fractions and equal signs. Whenever you have fractions and whenever you have fractions and equal sign, get rid of the fraction. Get rid of the fraction. How do we do that? First, find the LCD. What's the LCD in this case? Right. If you don't know, just take both of these and multiply them together. Second step. Multiply each term by the LCD. How many terms do we have in our equation? 2. This is one term. This is another term. So we multiply this side by 6. And we multiply this side by 6. Third step. Reduce. Cancel. Here we get rid of the fractions. So the 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 goes into 6 3 times. Doesn't that look a lot easier than what we started off with? Next step is multiply to get rid of the parentheses. So we have 2x minus 16 equals 3x minus 9. And then the fifth step is solve for x. Here's a question I'm going to ask you. I know the answer you're going to give me, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I have x's on both sides. Which one do I move? Which one is that? Always move the smaller to the larger. Why? So it always stays positive. Because if I move the 3 over there, it'll be negative. So I move the 2x. I subtract 2x from both sides. So I have negative 16. 3x minus 2x is just x. Then I add 9 to both sides to get the x by itself. So x is equal to negative 7. We would have got it, had we continued with what we were doing earlier, we would have gotten the same answer. But with more work. This is much easier. Let's look at another example. We have x squared over x minus 3 equals 9x minus 3. There's a property, a theorem that says if I have two equations, if A over B equals C over B, then the only way they can be equal is if A equals C. If the bottom are the same, the only way they can be equal is if the top is the same. Yeah, so now let's look at this. Does that go along with what we just talked about? We have fractions. What's the first thing we have to find? LCD. What's the LCD? Yeah, the LCD is x minus 3. If we multiply both sides of the equation by x minus 3. We multiply LCD. And then third step, we reduce. So the x minus 3 cancel, leaving x squared. X minus 3 equals 9. So yes, it goes on with this property, with the theorem. It says if the bottoms are the same, we just compare the top. So what's my answer?
Let's see.
No. Because I have to square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus 3. Because it's squared. If I have negative 3 and I square it, I get 9. I have a positive 3 and I square it, I get 9. So whenever you square root something that's squared, you have to put a plus or minus in front of the answer. Because it can be positive and negative. Okay, now, so what does this tell us? It tells us that our answers can be 3 or negative 3. Well, so what's the final answer? The final answer is x equals negative 3. If you plugged 3 back in the original equation, what happens to the bottom? Goes to 0. You cannot divide by 0. So we cannot use positive 3. So our only answer we have is negative 3. So far, so good. Let's get bigger now. Let's jump in the kiddie pool. All right, here we go. 2 over 3x plus 6 plus 1 over x squared minus 4 equals 4 over x minus 2. Here, in this case, the first thing you should always do factor the denominator. We need to see what we have to be able to find the least common denominator. So in this first one, what can we factor out? What do they both have in common? They both have a 3. Now, when you factor out a 3, to see what goes in there, divide both of these by 3. So 3x divided by 3 gives me x. 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. I know, I just blew your mind there.
And,
So whenever you factor out something, to see what goes in the parentheses, just divide it. Now, how about the second one? It's a quadratic equation. So we're going to have 2 parentheses. Very good. Excellent. X plus 2, X minus 2. Excellent. How'd you get that?
Because of the. And then,
It's perfect. Now, what this is called, whenever you have something like this, x squared, let's say number 4. 4 is made up of what? So it's x squared minus 2 squared. This is what's called difference of two squares. And whenever that happens, then we take both of these numbers, x and 2. One's positive and one's negative. Because the middle one cancels. Very good. If I had x squared minus 25, what would that one be? Be x plus 5, x minus 5. Perfect. And then the last one is just, it's already a linear equation. I'm sorry. It's called the difference of two squares. It's x squared minus y squared equals x plus y, x minus y. Okay, we factor the denominators. We factor the denominators. Now we go back to our rules. What's the LCD?
would it be that, like, plus or minus?
Well, whatever's on the bottom, it's got a 3. So 3 has to be an LCD. It's got an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. There's nothing else that's different. So that's going to be our LCD. And multiply the LCD to each of these terms. So we have 3x plus 2, x minus 2 times 2, 3x plus 2 plus 3x plus 2, x minus 2 times 1 over x plus 2, x minus 2 equals 3x plus 2, x minus 2, 4x minus 2. I just put the LCD in front of everybody. Now I cancel. In the first one, the 3's cancel. The x plus 2's cancels. So I have 2 times x minus 2. In the second one, the x plus 2 and x minus 2 cancel. So I have 3 times 1. And the last one, the x minus 2 cancels. So I have 3 times x plus 2 times 4. Multiply to get rid of parentheses and solve. So we have 2x minus 4 plus 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 times x is 12x. 12 times 2 is 24. Combine like terms. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Move the smaller to the larger, so I subtract 2x. -1 equals 10x plus 24. Minus 24. So 10x equals -25. And divide by 10. So x is equal to -25 over 10. Or -5 over 2. So far, so good. Now, is it a valid answer? Before we get started, once we factor out our answers, our equation, look at the bottom numbers. What x's can we not use? In other words, we cannot use any x that makes the bottom equal 0. So what's this one? If I take each of these and set them equal to 0, x equals -2. I cannot use -2 as an answer. Here, x equals 2. I cannot use 2. So -2 and 2 are the only answers I cannot have. Because you cannot have 0 on the bottom. Remember how we found the vertical asymptotes? We cannot have vertical asymptotes as answers. What are vertical asymptotes? It's where the bottom is equal to 0. So if x is -2, it equals 0. That's a vertical asymptote. When x is 2, it equals 0. It's a vertical. I can't have those two. So as long as this answer is not positive or -2, I'm good to go. So those are rational equations. Whenever you have fractions, get rid of the fractions, and there you have it. Now let's look at radical equations. Let's look at radical equations. So let's start off with something small. The square root of 3x plus 1 is equal to 4. How do we solve this one? How do we get to the x? What do we have to get rid of? Yeah, there's nothing on this side. There's no plus or minus on this side. So let's get rid of the square root. How do we get rid of the square root? Square both sides, exactly. Square both sides. So the square root and the square cancel. That gives us 3x plus 1 equals 16. And solve for x. Subtract 1 from both sides. 3x equals 15. Divide by 3. X is equal to 5. Always check your answer. Why do we have to check our answers here? Because we're dealing with square roots. What can you not have inside a square root? Square root of 0 is 0. You cannot have a negative. So whatever our x value is, better not make that inside negative. So three times 5 is 15. No, so it's okay. So that's our answer. Okay. Don't want to jump on that one just yet. What if we had this? 5 plus the square root of x plus 7 equals x. We can look at our equation here. What are our possible x answers? Look at this. You cannot have a negative. So the smallest this can be is what? The smallest it can equal 0. So the smallest x can be is -7. So our x has to be greater than or equal to -7. That's what our answer has to be to keep that safe. So now let's solve this. So in order to solve this, we must isolate the radical. So before you do anything, you have to get rid of anything that's plus or minus to it. So we subtract 5 from both sides. That leaves x plus 7 is equal to x minus 5. Next step. Wow. Square it. Yes, so we square, and remember, the right-hand side is an equation, so we have to square the whole equation. So the square root cancels, so we have x minus 7 is equal to x minus 5 times x minus 5. We have to FOIL that.
Can be plus 7.
What's that?
Can be plus 7. X plus 7.
Look at the blip. Yes. There's a typo. Now we have to FOIL this other side. So x, we get x squared. -5 is -10x plus 25. I went ahead and did that pretty quick. Hopefully by now everybody knows how to FOIL. So solve for x. Since it's a quadratic equation, we have to make it equal 0. So subtract x from both sides and subtract 7. Have x squared minus 11x plus 18.
Oh. Okay, I see what it. Yeah.
So now what we gotta do is factor it if possible. So we have x and x. What signs go in there? Nope. Look at the second sign. It's a plus. The only way the second sign can be a plus is if they're the same. They're both going to be the first sign. They're both going to be negative. What times what is 18? When you add them, you get 11. So set those equal to 0. So x is equal to 9 and x is equal to 2. Now, we have to check both of these answers. They both satisfy the radical. But do they satisfy the equation? So we have x equals 9 and x equals 2. The equation was 5 plus square root of x plus 7 equals x. We have 5 plus 9 plus 7 equals 9. 5 plus 2 plus 7 equals 2. This side x equals 2. 9 plus 7 is 16. Square root of 16 is 4. 5 plus 4 is 9. So that's a good answer. X equals 9 is a good answer. 2 plus 7 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 5 plus 3 is 8. Does 8 equal 2? No. So we cannot use 2. Perfect timing. We have one more example. Example 6. Now it gets ugly. What if you have multiple radicals? What if you have multiple radicals?
Combine.
Nope. You have to isolate one of the radicals. So let's move the other one. Let's move the x plus 5 to the other side. Let's subtract square root of x plus 5 from both sides. So we have square root of x minus 3 equals 4 minus the square root of x plus 5. Because now we have one of them by himself. Now we can square both sides to get rid of the first radical. So we have an x minus 3. Those cancel. The other side is 4 minus square root of x plus 5 times 4 minus square root of x plus 5. We have to FOIL. 4 times 4 is 16. Positive and negative is a negative. 4 radical x plus 5. Negative times positive is negative. 4 radical x plus 5. Negative times negative is a positive. Radical x plus 5 times radical x plus 5 is radical x plus 5 squared. So far, so good? Now, what can we, on the right-hand side, the square root and the square cancel out. And we can combine these two. Negative 4, a square root of 5, negative 4 makes it negative 8 square root of x plus 5 plus x plus 5. Combine like terms. So we have an x. 16 plus 5 is 21. Minus 8 x plus 5. What do you think we do next? We're gonna isolate the radical. So we have to move everything else to the other side. Subtract the x. Subtract the 21. So the x's cancel. Negative 21, negative 3 is negative 24. Equals negative 8 square root of x plus 5. We have to get rid of the coefficient. Since they're both negative, we can change the signs. Divide by 8. 24 divided by 8 is 3. Square root of x plus 5. You see how small it got all of a sudden? Square both sides. Because get rid of the square root. So we have 9 equals x plus 5. Subtract 5. So x equals 4. And of course, we got to plug it in to make sure it works. And it works. That's the end of that section. Actually, what's even sucks, if we had 10 more minutes, we could finish the last section, which deals with inequalities. But we're out of time. We'll do it next week. And then that'll be end of chapter 3, and we start chapter 4, which will be the most difficult of all the chapters because we have a lot of moving parts in that chapter. And then it gets easy afterwards. So I need you all to catch up all your